Hey everybody, Matt Johnston here. We've been talking recently in other videos about the Americans with Disabilities Act and accommodations for employees, particularly in light of bringing employees back into the workplace following the pandemic and all the shutdowns and all of that stuff that's been going on. In a previous video, we talked about the application of the Americans with Disabilities Act, its general rules, and hopefully a fairly non-legal description of what it all means. But today we're going to start talking about, in subsequent videos, we're going to start talking about the interactive process. And the interactive process was identified by the EEOC, and they sort of developed it a little bit. It's the method in which employers should be going about receiving requests for and providing accommodations to employees. Now, we're not going to talk about whether or not a COVID-19 is relevant in terms of the accommodation. This is just sort of a little bit general. We'll talk a little bit about the COVID-19 in a minute. So first off, the first thing that employer needs to do is they need to understand the job itself and its functions and its requirements, both physical requirements, skill and knowledge requirements, what the job is, what the job does. A lot of HR managers will tell you that you should have a job description for every job, and I cannot dispute that. You really should have a written job description for every job, and that job should lay out both what it's doing and the requirements to complete that job. So for example, let's say that you have an HVAC technician. Their job is to go out to client sites, homes or businesses, and they are going to be required to examine HVAC systems and to determine if they're working, if they're not working. So what are some of the functions that are involved there? Well, you need to have some knowledge about HVAC systems, so you can have some sort of generalized either experience or educational requirement. A person's going to need to be able to be comfortable working in small spaces, so somebody who is claustrophobic, probably not a good idea. They need to be comfortable sometimes working in the dark or low light situations. They need to be able to move around, so they're going to need to be fairly functional. They're going to need to be able to probably walk, use both hands. They probably need to have some level of decent eyesight. And all of those sorts of things are part of the job requirements. Now, why am I saying these sorts of things? A job requirement that is necessary to complete the job is not one that's necessarily going to require an accommodation. So let's go back to our HVAC technician. The HVAC technician needs to be able to get into a person's home and move about the home or the business. That generally means they're going to need to be mobile. It does not mean that they have to have both fully functional legs. They could have, a prosthetic leg or something along those lines, but they need to be mobile, which probably precludes somebody in a wheelchair, largely because that person the HVAC technician has to be able to move around, bend, squat, work, move in different spaces and move up and down floors, perhaps ladders and things of that nature. So an accommodation for mobility probably isn't going to do so well. Now, let's say our HVAC technician is kind of afraid of the dark. It's not unusual. So if he's afraid of the dark or she's afraid of the dark, you can make sure you provide enough lighting sources, battery-powered lighting sources, for our technician to do their job. That's an accommodation that an employer can make. Like, I'm legitimately afraid of the dark. I have this fear. It's documented. Here's all of the people that I deal with who know this. This is what I need. I need a pretty powerful handheld battery-operated light before going into somebody's basement. Not an unreasonable request. So that's an accommodation that could be done. All right. So it is vitally important for employers to spend some significant time thinking both about what the job is and its role within the company, but also what are the requirements that are necessary. Now, the reason why the requirements become necessary is because those are the things that you may have to change. You may have to adapt and accommodate. So knowing what those requirements are is going to be helpful, because if it's an undue burden, an employer is not required to comply with that accommodation request. In the meantime, please stay safe out there. We will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.